This is a story of broken promises.
The British are the only people that exported large numbers of its poor children.
A story that has never been fully told.
I've never talked to Margaret about it, she's never talked to me, and you'll find half the others haven't talked about it either.
How the richest empire in the world exported its poorest children to a distant Australian town and severed all parental bonds.
My mother, she tried for 6 years to get us back.
How a promise to nurture, care for and educate thousands was cruelly broken.
They shouldn't have done that to those children.
This is a story of how a war hero may have committed an unforgivable act of betrayal.
No one believed this possibly could happen, but it did.
This is a story about courageous children and their long journey home.
Stop saying it never happened, but rather, thank God it never happened to me.
I think the majority of children, for their experience here, were shortchanged on a decent education, socially isolated through all their childhood, emotionally deprived. And that's even in cases where there was no sexual abuse or physical abuse. I think most of the children that came through this scheme, particularly those of a younger age, were damaged by the experience.
In 1959, a 12-year-old David Hill and his two brothers were separated from their mother and sent alone from England to Australia.
My mum was a single parent. She had 4 children. Mum got whatever work she could. We had a bit of welfare. We were very poor.
He was just one of about 500,000 underprivileged children sent without their parents to former British colonies by English child migrant schemes. Of those, 1,000 ended up here at the Molong Fairbridge Farm School, 180 miles west of Sydney. No child wanted to be sent here.
Like a lot of parents, my mum was persuaded to make the sacrifice of the things she loved most because of the promise she was given that we would be given an education and opportunities out here in Australia by Fairbridge that she had no hope in the world of providing for us.
On March 23, 2006, David went to the annual Fairbridge picnic at the site of the old farm school in Molong.
Ladies and gentlemen, this crowd of people you see before you're about to sing, I've got David Hill, who was a Fairbridge boy, and these are all Fairbridge boys and girls. G'day, David. How you going? Come over there. All right. 1, 2, 3.
There's an old-fashioned bus and it's meant to carry us along the road to Fairbridge Farm.
What made this reunion different was that David had decided to begin historical research on the day-to-day details of growing up on the farm. What he uncovered shocked him.
The picture that's painted by the kids who lived the experience, all of their childhoods here, is very different from the rose-tinted glasses through which historians have been looking at this place.
Along the road to Fairbridge Farm.
As he asked for personal details of the years at Fairbridge, David discovered a dark and painful legacy common to many of the Fairbridge children. Stories, until now, hidden not only from each other, but in some cases, from their own families.
So many people were being abused and nobody knew. There was this silence.
The stories David Hill heard that day moved him to investigate more closely what happened over the nearly 40 years the Fairbridge Farm School existed in Molong.
I was totally unaware of some of the things that went on. I was unaware at the suffering of a lot of the kids that were here.
I think as you get older, all these memories that you put down into the deepest recesses of your mind are all coming back.
On many levels, the fundamental promise of Fairbridge was never realised.
Of well over 1,000 kids that went to Fairbridge, about 10 managed eventually to get to university, and most of those were in a very small group that were lucky enough to have a parent eventually come to Australia and they rejoined them. They were no better off educationally by coming to Australia than if they'd stayed in England, and probably in many cases a lot worse off.
David was one of the few lucky kids that went on to higher education. His careers in public service, transportation, sports administration and media made him a national figure.
I used to think bullets bounced off me until I started researching and writing this book. See, my experience at Fairbridge was, compared with a lot of others, pretty good. But I tell you, for a lot of the kids, it was hell.
In 1908, a 23-year-old South African Rhodes Scholar by the name of Kingsley Fairbridge published a pamphlet that addressed what he saw as two of Britain's greatest problems: how to extend white settlement throughout Britain's colonies, and what to do with England's poor and destitute children. The pamphlet was entitled Two Problems, One Solution.
And the one solution was put them together.
Fairbridge proposed a charitable foundation that would take children from the slum-ridden streets of England and send them to farm schools in Canada, South Africa and Australia. There, he believed, they would be raised and schooled in country orphanages to become skilled agricultural workers.
The boys to be farmers and the girls as farmers' wives. That was the idea.
This was not the first British migration scheme. Charitable organisations such as Bernardo's, as well as the Catholic and Protestant churches, were running similar schemes in the age before the state took responsibility for child welfare.
Fairbridge was different because it had the support of the upper classes, the aristocracy, even royalty in Britain. King Edward VIII, when he was Prince of Wales, put £1,000 into Fairbridge with the terrific words, "This is not charity, it is an imperial investment." And the current Queen, Queen Elizabeth, put £2,000 of her wedding gift into Fairbridge in 1948. Fairbridge could certainly count on a lot of support and influence from high places in Britain.
By 1913, the first Fairbridge Farm School was set up in Western Australia. And by 1940, others were established in South Africa, Canada, and at Molong, New South Wales.
The British are the only people in history that exported large numbers of its poor children without parents to the various empires' colonies.
This was a scheme fed by enrolment efforts throughout Britain. Up to 70 middle and upper class women, known as honorary secretaries, would canvass the homes of the poorer areas of their districts and seek out impoverished or broken families. Parents faced the agonising choice of giving up their children for the promise of a better future. Paddy O'Brien was one of those children. He came out of poverty in England to the farm school in Molong when he was 15.
I think my mother saw that there wasn't a lot of opportunity for us to stay in that sort of environment. And one day she told us she saw an ad in the paper, said Fairbridge Farm School, come to the land of opportunity, Australia, land of sunshine. Sold the place pretty well. They'll have horses, you can ride horses to school and you'll be able to do all sorts of sporting activities, lots of opportunity. And at the time, at the age of 15, I thought, well, it sounds like a big holiday camp, sounds fine. So we were sold. And next thing I know, we were down to Knockholt in Kent, a lovely big mansion we stayed in for 2 weeks.
A stately home known as John Howard Mitchell House was given to the Fairbridge Foundation by a wealthy widow who wanted children to experience the life of their mother culture before they were shipped to their assigned farm schools. For all of them, it was a glimpse of an enchanted world. Equipped with a complete wardrobe from London's most fashionable department stores, many of the children experienced, for the first time, new clothes and a surfeit of food.
Now listen,
Ian Bailiff remembers the beauty and luxury at Knockholt when he arrived in 1955.
We had clean clothes and new clothes and plenty of food, 3 meals a day, went to the pictures, got pocket money, the whole bit,
After weeks in Knockholt, The luxury continued when they boarded a P&O cruise liner and were checked into first-class accommodation for their 6-week journey to Australia.
We were put in the former state cabins, 5-course lunches every day and 6-course dinners, and we would watch a string quartet play classical music. I'd never seen a violin before, I'd never heard classical music.
Vince McMullen set out for the Molong School in 1961.
We'd come out of abject poverty in Scotland, and it was tremendous to see all this fanfare and beauty and cleanliness and order and the aromas of the cooking and the way they served you, and the captain would join us at our table. So that was imprinted in my mind at 7.5 years of age.
We thought this was a terrific idea. And of course it contrasted with the thud of reality when we arrived in Sydney.
The promise of a life well lived was rudely broken upon arrival.
We got onto the train. In my particular party, there must have been a dozen. So we were in this one carriage, and some were sleeping on the floor, some were even sleeping up in the racks. And of course, they just threw a blanket over you, and then of course we travelled all night because, left about 9 o'clock and got to Molong about 6 in the morning, I think.
When we arrived at Molong station, the older boy in the group said, now we're about to see where we've been headed for the last 6 weeks. And it was then that I realised, that's when it hit me, that, this wasn't going to be real good.
One of Maggie McLaughlin's first memories was of standing at Molong Station as a 5-year-old in 1939.
I thought this place was so far out, away from everything, it seemed quite desolate. And this was just so different, vastly different.
Mary O'Brien came to Fairbridge as a 13-year-old in 1959. She was sent from an English orphanage.
By comparison, it was a totally different life. It was much nicer in the English orphanage than it was when we went to Fairbridge. We didn't expect life to be quite so hard, so Spartan.
Even then, I don't think at that age I did really realise just how far I was away. But it was certainly too far to go back.
I looked around and I thought, this can't be where we're heading for. It's got to be something more. This is just a transit. We're in transit. There's somewhere else to go. But no. This was it. This was the end of the line.
The dawn to dusk rituals that drove Fairbridge were immediately explained to the new arrivals. Their fine clothes and barely scuffed suitcases were taken from them and never seen again. Everyone was assigned some form of farm labour.
The boys were rotated around the different farm duties, including the sheep and the wheat, and the girls were rotated around a range of domestic duties. They were rostered here on the farm, or on the vegetable gardens, or on the dairy, or on the bakery.
Little kids at the age of 4, 5, 6, 7 were asked to do ridiculous chores that were way and above them. Little kids in bare feet shouldn't be asked to go and chop a barrel load of wood on a cold winter's morning, for example. The trainees that are 15, 16 years of age, they'd come back to the cottage at 6, 7 o'clock at night, absolutely exhausted, having been out all day.
It quickly became apparent that farm work was a priority over school work.
What you learnt on that farm, you did it well. But I had no education. If you wanted to work as a farmhand or a station hand for the rest of your life, very good. But I didn't know how to use a public phone. I didn't know how to do the banking. Only thing I had training to do was to work on a farm.
Even though the slogan of Fairbridge was boys to be farmers and girls for farmers' wives, very few boys ever ended up owning their own farms. Most of them were to remain unskilled labourers and girls as domestics.
These kids never left the farm. So they suffered social isolation, they felt socially inadequate, they were denied a decent education. Half of them left school before completing year 8 of schooling. It was largely a funding problem. I found in the research of this that the principal at Fairbridge was instructed in writing to force all but exceptional children to leave school at the compulsory minimum age and to shed paid staff and get the kids to do the farm work.
Facing a life of hardship and little promise of a future, and no family to comfort them, kids turn to each other for support.
I think you'll find that most of the children who are at Fairbridge will say that the camaraderie and the fun the kids made for themselves within that camaraderie were their fondest recollections of being here. Yeah, we had a lot of fun, as all kids in a group would.
Everyone interacted with each other. Like, your family, there was, that's all you had to cling to. You made your own fun.
One of my best things here, I was very, very fond of horses. And I think that's what made my life here happier, because I loved horses and I had a horse of my own here.
We had wonderful holidays down near Jurara to the sea. I loved that. They were really happy times for me, really.
I have many, many funny memories of things that happened. I mean, events that children, it's like reading a boy's own manual when you're here, because there was hardly a day went by when things didn't happen, like a tractor crashed down there, went through the wall, we bowled tyres down the hill and we fell off horses. So there was always something going on, yes. It was a funny time as well.
The Fairbridge kids gouge their names. Here's Smiley Bailiff, Katie Henderson, Runty Maycock. Runty loves Katie. Runty Maycock, I remember him. The kids used to run away from Fairbridge, and we had a kid in our cottage, Eggy Taylor. Eggy, because he had a big egg head. And he went bush. He went by himself. And he was away for about a week before they caught him. And he lived on bush tucker. And we were asking him how he survived on bush tucker when he had no matches to light a fire. And he said, among other things, he used to catch lizards and eat them raw. And of course, we never believed him. So the following Saturday afternoon, Eggy came in. There used to be an old laundry tub just here. And Eggy came in with a live lizard after lunch on Saturday, and in front of a whole crowd of us, held it by the tail and smashed its head on the tub. And then he, with a rusty old penknife, opened up its innards and turned it inside out. And I believed everything Eggy told me after that, because we hadn't believed him till then.
Quickly, children learned the unspoken value system among the kids at Fairbridge. Survival of the fittest.
I can remember becoming quite friendly with one of the kids, and he was the toughest, roughest boy. And I suppose you could say I had the brains and he had the brawn, and between us we were a good team.
I might have thumped a couple of kids at one stage, but that was purely just to establish my, I suppose, get some respect, because that's the way it worked.
For many, Fairbridge was a place where emotions were best hidden.
If a child was artistic or poetic or effeminate, he had to act stoic and tough to survive. About the only time you could actually be emotional, it'd be late at night and you'd hear a child crying. And somebody would say, "Oh, who's crying?" And you'd say, "It's so-and-so, he's homesick." And you'd hear, "Oh." No one ever criticised or demeaned or laughed at a child who was crying for their mother or parents or their home. Every child lived with this understanding that that was not taboo. You could let your emotions go when it came to the pain and the homesickness that you felt in your heart.
Inevitably, children wrote letters to their parents asking to return to England. Those letters were often withheld by Fairbridge staff. Letters from parents were kept on file as well and never passed along to the children. The results were devastating.
If they didn't like the letters you wrote, well, they just got squashed. So as far as over in England, they were thinking, well, we're not writing. As far as over here goes, we thought they weren't writing.
Although my mother did write one, but we did get one or two letters to say that, she wanted us to come back. She wanted to bring us back from here, and we agreed we wanted to come back. But of course those letters stopped, and they were stopped, as I found out when I got my file many years later. She tried for 6 years to get us back. And I would have felt a lot better if I'd have known, even after I left Fairbridge, that was the case, because I absolutely, resented my parents because they just left us here and that was it. But they didn't just leave us here, they did try to get us back.
For many Fairbridgians, the feelings of abandonment are the most difficult to overcome. Some have grappled with them throughout their lives.
And you thought, what have I done to deserve it? And I think a lot of Fairbridge kids had that sort of feeling that they must have done something wrong somewhere to be sent here.
But the truth was, parents were powerless to intervene, even if they had known the full details. The contract they signed meant a long and expensive legal action was the only way a child could be returned to parental custody. This was an option very few could afford.
You accepted it for what it was. You were there, that was your lot, and you knew you couldn't do anything about it.
The lives of the Fairbridge children revolved around their assigned cottage.
This is where the boot lockers were, because we weren't allowed to wear shoes inside the cottages. But most of the kids wore no shoes around the village anyway and left them there. There were about 15 or 16 kids to each cottage, with a dormitory, a locker room, a bathroom, a kitchen and a dining room. There was no lounge furniture, there was no lounge. Here's the dormitory. There were 15 or 16 beds, no bedside furniture, no personal effects. My bed was just here. There were 3 beds on this side of the door, and my little bed, when I first arrived, was just there. I remember it well because it was extremely traumatic for all of us arriving at this place. And nobody ever forgot their first day or their first night here. And I can remember sobbing myself to sleep on that first night here. And I had strangers either side of me in these beds because my brothers were somewhere up on this other wall.
Every cottage was supervised by a cottage mother.
She had 2 small rooms.
The assignment of cottage mother could change a child's life.
If you were in a certain cottage this way, you may have had the cottage mother read bedtime stories to you and pray with you. Whereas this cottage mother would be likely to do what she did to me, lash you with an ironing cord, and then come back when you're asleep and pull the blankets off and do it again.
Ian Bailiff remembers his cottage mother, Mrs. De Freitas.
Most wicked person I've ever come across in my life. She used to belt us with a riding crop. Little kid like Robbie Henderson, you know, he got flogged terribly here, right there. You know, 40 times because he ran away when after he arrived. He was only 4. He arrived and he ran away up the back paddock, so I brought him back and flogged him. She used to skite about it and boast about it.
An embittered, lonely old woman who should never have been with children.
If I knew where she was buried, I'd never done a grave or a church, anything, or would I ever? But if I knew where she was buried, I'd go to a grave and work out where her head was and piss on it, I'm telling you. And that is the truth. That's how I feel about her. She was, and there's a lot of people feel the same, who within this cottage, who feel much the same way.
She used to lie on that deck.
As a 5-year-old in 1950, Jimmy Walker received his welcome to Fairbridge from Mrs. Hodgkinson.
She'd come in and say your prayers, you little blackguards, and flog us with the ironing cord on the back when we were all kneeling down to save them. And all that sort of type stuff which you just thought was the norm.
Stuart Lee arrived as a 4-year-old in 1955 with his older brothers. In his 13 years at Fairbridge, he saw his share of cottage mothers.
Like, they weren't trained to be cottage mothers. Sadistic as they were, we copped it. As simple as that. Girls or boys, didn't matter. The girls copped a fair bit more than the boys in some senses.
We learnt nothing about the facts of life, why our bodies changed the way they did and the problems we went through as you go through teenage life. We were not told anything, we knew nothing why. It was just here, put this on and look after yourself. No one ever said, we love you. Gee, you've done a good job. That was really fine. Nobody. She was supposed to be a cottage mother, but there was no mother in her. She was a spinster lady. She'd had no children, so how could she be a mother?
Some cottage mothers did try the best they could to add compassion and affection to the children's lives. But no one escaped the attention or the severity of the man who ran the Fairbridge School.
Over there is the principal's house, an awesome figure. much revered. His name was Woods.
Frederick Kinnersley Smithers Woods presided over the farm school at Molong from 1942 to 1966. Woods was a bear of a man with extraordinary physical strength. He was considered the unquestioned leader of Fairbridge, a major part of the lives of every child who passed through the farm during his tenure.
He was a South African. He had been a Rhodes Scholar, a champion wrestler, a champion swimmer. He was a product of Edwardian British Empire, like Kinnersley Fairbridge, the founder of the scheme. He was a mixed bag. On occasions, he would demonstrate such great tenderness, particularly to the little children.
Generally speaking, he was loved and feared by the children. He could be a lot of fun when he took us out swimming, and all the kids would climb on him because he was a huge man.
Woods wore many hats. In addition to being the principal, he was the leader of the Boy Scout troop. He ran the Junior Farmers Club, coached the hockey and rugby teams, and drove the farm's wooden school bus.
This is the old Fairbridge bus.
David Wilson, who arrived in 1951, recalls his trips on the bus.
On the way to Orange, if you're a bit overweight, he used to get you out and run alongside the bus to lose about 10 pounds. If he caught you with your hands in the pocket at any time, he used to sew them up and that was it. If you used to leave your shoes over there, he used to confiscate them and cane you because you got no shoes, but he'd have them.
He could be so brutal, terrible brutality. He had an awesome temper. An angry Woods was somebody you'd jump through a hedge to avoid.
When Woods thought a child needed to be disciplined, his favourite method was caning, and he had multiple instruments with which he would impose his punishments.
There was three of them. There was a chimney sweep broom, half a hockey stick, and a normal cane about 6 foot long, a whippy sort of cane. Because whenever he was going to punish somebody, he always formed a circle and made a big deal of it. You know, he used to love, he had that streak in him where he loved sort of beating kids.
He hit me more than twice with that hockey stick. I used to grab hold of his leg and he used to know I used to dig the teeth in. I wouldn't hesitate. If I could get my arms around his leg, I'd dig the teeth in.
I had bruises for about a month after he came me. Because you got to understand, he was in his prime of his life. He was about 22 stone, 6'3" or something, and there was no fat on him at all muscle. And he used to really lay into us.
One morning in 1950, a 13-year-old named Ron Simpson accidentally overslept in his cottage. He was supposed to have been on dairy duty and was late getting to the cows. For this transgression, he felt the wrath of Woods.
He bent me over and he hit me with a hockey stick, and I went straight into the bath. But he didn't hit me on the backside, he hit me on the back, just above the coxbone. And he pulled me out of the bath, turned me around, and then he hit me on the back again, sent me straight down the steps. There was 5 steps, and I had gravel rash, I was crying, I wet my pants, and I had to go back to work, back to the dairy and clean up the cow yards and that. Would have been about 3 months after that I was on kitchen duty, and I got the shooting pain in my lower part of my back. I fell down onto the ground and I couldn't feel anything from the waist down. Nico picked me up and ran me down to the hospital, and they x-rayed my back and found I had a broken back. That's what really happened to me.
Simpson spent the next 3 years in hospital as a result of the beating.
I have a missing disc and the bones joined together, and they're irregular. They're not like a normal spine.
Are you in pain?
Yes, I get a lot of pain. I have trouble getting out of bed every morning of my life.
Despite Wood's physical discipline and public humiliations, a number of the Fairbridge kids liked him and remember him with great affection as the father they never had.
I do believe that Woods, at some stage, tried to be a father to 260-odd children at the same time, which is an impossible task. And I think we all had different experiences with him.
I admired the man, I really did. One thing about Mr. Woods, and all the kids that went through here, he very rarely got the police. He sorted the problem out himself. And he had some problems here.
I think he was a very forceful person. He ruled with a fist of iron.
Sadly, I mean, while Fairbridge has got all this stuff on their records about the physical abuse of the children and the breaches of the law, at the end, Woods was sacked for something else altogether, and nobody knew why he was sacked. It turns out his wife, Ruth, who was a great stabilising influence in his life, died quite suddenly in the mid-1960s. And Woods struck up an affair with one of the other cottage mothers as a widower and proposed to marry her. Fairbridge were horrified by this affair because the cottage mother he proposed to marry was a divorcee. The minutes record that Woods was guilty of scandalising and besmirching the good name of Fairbridge because he didn't leave a decent interval after Ruth's death and he proposed to remarry a divorcee who was a cottage mother.
Many of these children suffered terrible physical abuse at the hands of Woods, the cottage mothers, and other members of staff, the very people who were set up by the Fairbridge Council to care for them. These betrayals of trust had never been revealed until the day that David Hill turned up at the reunion picnic. The worst were more horrifying than David could have imagined.
I was sexually abused when I was 5 years old. And it was down there. So I've been holding it in all these years.
Who sexually abused you?
Mr. Newberry.
Jack Newberry was a gardener at the farm. He went on to become principal in 1966. He was dismissed in 1969 after several other children spoke out about his molestation. None of these accusations were made public at the time.
I just kept it in. And I suppose in a way I felt like it was my fault that it happened. But as I got older, I realised it wasn't my fault.
Not long after, Vivian's chance for a better life was shut down by Fairbridge bureaucracy.
Up the road there was a family that had plenty of money that wanted to adopt me, and by some uncanny thing they were not allowed to adopt me, and they had money. I mean, maybe if they adopted me, my life probably would have been a lot better, but it wasn't. And yeah, so, you know, it's hard to drag up, but it has to be told. It has to come out, and in the long run it helps us, and it'll help any other children that were here. And I feel sorry for the ones that happened to before me.
They just took liberties. You'd have to go to their house or their rooms.
And if you gave them sexual favours, you were thought better of. I'll let you know that.
This is the first time I've really spoken.
We don't talk about
Never
it.
told anybody.
Nobody.
No,
You're the first one.
Ever in my life. Mm.
It's an awful secret to live with, isn't it?
Yes. Shh, come on. I've never talked to Margaret about it, she's never talked to me, and you'll find half the others haven't talked about it either.
Mary O'Brien was sexually abused while working as a trainee in the quarters of a staff member.
He and his wife and 2 children had quarters in Gloucester House, and I was sent to stay with them, and the girls in Fairbridge were often sent to stay with families that worked on the farm, and it was considered a privilege. I just ended up being a sex object for this aftercare officer. When his wife went into bed and his children were in bed, he used to come into my room and sexually abuse me, and this was happening in the same bedroom as this man's daughter on a regular basis. And then the next day I was expected to serve him breakfast and clean up after him and his family. I was shocked, I was embarrassed, I was hurt, bewildered.
Girls were not the only victims of sexual abuse.
While I was working in the kitchen, a man by the name of West, he had 3 children, he was married. There was an area where we used to have to peel potatoes, just clearing up the peelings to put in the pig bins. And this man came out, this West. He was the cook there. And he grabbed me, pushed me into the toilet. There's a small toilet in the area. And he tore my pants off and he sodomised me. And I was about 13. I don't know how they can do it to people.
Did you tell anyone?
Yes. I told my cottage mother, and she said, Mr. West's not like that. He's got 3 children, he's a married man. And she beat me with a stick. That was her answer.
David Hill's work on the history of Fairbridge led him to write a book that was published in June of 2007. It was met with controversy both in Australia and England. But no allegation was more controversial than the story of former war hero and Australian Governor-General Lord William Slim. Slim visited the Fairbridge School at Molong in 1956. During that visit, a 10-year-old Robert Stevens claims he was sexually molested by the Governor-General.
After a visit, a 2 or 3 day visit to the farm by the Governor-General and his entourage, as they were leaving Red Cottage, where I was, would anyone like to drive in the Governor-General's car down the drive? And myself and a couple of others put our hands up, and myself and another boy were selected, so off we went and into the car we got, into the back part of it, and there was him and his, I guess you'd call equerry, was there, and we're initially sitting on his knee, and all of a sudden there's crawly hands going everywhere, and because you can imagine it was only a short drive down the driveway, and being, you know, I at the time would have been 10, what do you do? Here are 2 boys both being with hands running up and down their trousers by the Governor-General.
This is the first time Robert Stevens has aired these allegations on camera. Slim's son, the current Lord Slim, denies the allegations. Stevens went so far as to identify the second boy in the limousine that day, who, while declining to be on camera for this documentary, verified Stevens' account.
We were the suckers that happened to go in that wretched car and had to sit on his knee, and that's what happened. And to this day, it just amazes me that society can look after its own if it wants to, and this is a classic case of them looking after that family's interest, yet the hundreds of Fairbridge children that went through Fairbridge have got to fight to get recognition of what happened and to get some justice. I remember on one of these trips to England looking for my father, and I was with Lorne on this instance, and here's a statue of Slim with a card from a child in Singapore thanking this great man. And that's when it hit me, and this is many, many years ago, of just how serious what he did was. And that's a legacy of Fairbridge.
It's bad enough to hear these stories from the children, but when I was researching their stories, I found on the official records of Fairbridge in Australia and in the UK, confirmation of a number of these terrible stories. It's in writing, it's still in their files. Fairbridge knew. They knew, and nothing was done about it. The Fairbridge Farm School at Molong closed in 1974. The
The property has since been sold. The remainder of the village has fallen into disrepair. The Fairbridge Council that ran the farm school became the Fairbridge Foundation, an organisation still in operation today. Their endowment has grown from the investment of the money earned from the sale of the school, and John Kennedy is the chairman of the foundation.
The objective of the council is, A, to use its assets wisely and prudently, if you like, or invest its assets widely so that it makes an income. And then secondly, to use that income to distribute to other charities who have primary objective of assisting children in need or with some suffering, experiencing some disadvantage that may be able to be helped by provision of funding.
The charter of that foundation is that the income from that foundation will be distributed to various charitable bodies, but will exclude Fairbridge children.
Fairbridge's scheme was idealistic, altruistic, clearly. Looking at the context, it seems that it was fulfilling a need. Some of the children who came to Australia under the scheme benefited greatly and are very grateful for the scheme. Very grateful. You don't know what would have happened if they'd stayed in the UK. I guess that one of the real difficulties the current council has got is that we have got an objective of trying to help, if you like, today's children and future children. They don't want to get distracted, as it were, from the needs of now and the future, from what happened in the past.
The foundation, despite what they might say to you, is worth millions and millions of dollars. That millions of dollars came from the Fairbridge Farm in Molong. And the reason why it sold for the amount of money it did, because it was a very good-looking farm and it was well run. But who did it? It was the children that worked that farm. I believe that they have the right to have that fund supporting them, and it's a matter of the establishment coming to realise that it was child labour. It was unpaid for child labour.
What's your personal response, having heard of some of the incidents that have occurred, particularly to the young girls?
Well, your personal response is gosh, what would you say, can you have when you put it? Deep concern, I guess, if that happened. If that happened to those children.
Do you think there's any doubt that it did happen?
I don't know. That's the problem I've got. I wasn't there. I haven't talked to the people. Mm-hmm. I've got to rely on what's written by David Hill in there, and so that I don't know. That's my problem. But I'd be shocked if it's true.
Well, doesn't it make you angry to read of the stories of these cottage mothers and these people who worked in the positions of trust?
Original sin doesn't make me angry, just makes me realise that there's original sin. I'm sorry, I mean, that's a Christian view, but people are people. Human nature.
John Kennedy, the director of Fairbridge, said an interesting thing when I presented some of the stories you'd written about in the book. He said that we're all filled with original sin and it's human. What's your reaction?
Well, anger, blind rage.
Yeah. Why?
Well, they shouldn't have done that to those children.
Fairbridge's response has led to a legal action that was filed in 2008. Over 60 former Fairbridgians joined the action. It demands an acknowledgement by the current Fairbridge Foundation of the abuses and crimes that occurred at the farm school in Molong.
The basis of the claim of the kids is that they were damaged. They were promised opportunity, they were promised education, and they were denied that, and on top of that, a large number of these kids were sexually and physically abused.
A successful settlement may give some financial compensation to victims whose lives were greatly affected by the neglect and cruelty of those who were trusted with their welfare.
To me, it means that they are recognising that an injustice was done and that that's part of the healing process of doing it. Recognition that you guys did go through the situation in your lives that was totally unacceptable.
It's enormously gratifying to me to see the prospect now that some of them, at least, are going to get recognition of the bad things that happened to them, and some compensation. I got to stress, I think it's too little, too late, but it's better than nothing.
To date, the Fairbridge Foundation has refused comment on the suit or any of its allegations. However, the Australian federal government has issued a formal apology for abuses perpetrated by child migration schemes similar to Fairbridge. In May 2009, alumni of the farm school at Molong meet for another reunion. This one much different than the festive event held just 3 years earlier.
Well, your personal response.
They gathered to attend the first screening of this documentary. Many come with spouses and children.
Deep concern, I guess, if that happened.
What's going to be really challenging with this documentary, today when we show it for the first time, there are going to be Fairbridge kids who are coming with loved ones that they haven't been able to tell what happened to them, and they'll be sitting with those family members watching this for the first time.
Original sin doesn't make me angry, it just makes me realise that there's original sin. I'm sorry, I mean that's a Christian view, but people are people, human nature.
It's getting a burden out and releasing a burden that's been there for a very long time, in some cases 50 years.
My wife has a saying that whatever we bring into the light loses its hold, its power over us.
No, I think it'll still be with me. You've still got that stigma against you, you know. It's a mark that never leaves you. You've got to live with it all your life.
The foundation, despite what they might say to you.
The stories of abuse shown on the screen that day compel others in the audience to tell of their accounts, both good and bad, for the first time.
I was physically, mentally and sexually abused while I was there. The same people that denied it at the time are still denying it today. I've even got guys here that I grew up with tonight. As we walked out of there, I've got tears streaming down my face and they're telling me, it didn't happen like that, it didn't happen like that. That's garbage. I know it happened like that for me.
I had a very good time at Fairbridge. I don't know of kids in Australia who came out as well equipped to handle life as maybe I did. I know how to kill, I know how to cook, I know how to bake bread, I know how to make soap, I know how to butcher.
What about the other stories you heard, the women tonight?
That came as a complete surprise. I was not aware of it. I know there was a couple of girls there that were a bit loose between the knees, you might say, and but I didn't know of anything of the staff interfering with girls, no.
Hi.
Lisa Larkin has come to the screening with her mother, Daphne Appleby. Both Daphne and her husband, Norman, attended the farm school at Molong.
I've always known that both my parents, but in particular Mum, is very strong and very positive, and I can see from the documentary where her strength and courage in her character has come from. I can also see the difficulties that my dad has had because their experiences were very different. My father didn't have such a wonderful time and his life was in turmoil until the day he passed away. So the documentary showed, I guess, where the strength and determination in their characters actually came from. It also showed what a privileged life I've had and Mum will give to me before herself. I guess she loves that family that she has now because she never had it.
For David Hill, the screening marks a journey come full circle.
My little boy Damien turned 5 while I was writing the book, and the realisation that some of these kids were younger than that when they're taken from their homes in England, put on a boat with no parents, sailed out to Australia and taken to what was then a remote farm in the Australian bush. And I looked at my son who's 5 years of age and it's just beyond comprehension now to think that children his age and younger were sent on their own to the other side of the world to live their entire childhoods with that level of deprivation and isolation.
One of the things that I personally want to happen is for the cliche to go away. We've got to move on.
It's a dreadful statement, because you wouldn't go to a psychiatric hospital and say to the patients, it's time to move on. Move on, you've got to deal with the past. Some of those people have been dreadfully scarred and hurt, and they can't just move on. And I just wish they'd come to a place where they would stop saying it never happened, but rather they'd say, thank God it never happened to me.
Somebody's baby in the wilderness. Won't somebody please love me? But I'm losing innocence. I'm somebody's baby in the wilderness. Won't somebody